There you go. CEO Wisdom Podcast with Katherina Tarnai-Lokhorst. Today, podcast brought to you by Podfire, which is my podcasting company. If you want to start or scale a podcast, let me know. For guests, amazing guests like Katherina, interviewing these folks, getting insights from them, growing your subscriber base, and even getting clients. That's everything that a podcast allows you to do. Kat, I'm glad to have you on the pod. By the way, for people that didn't know, Kat is president and co-founder at the Lockhorse Group Ventures. Can you introduce yourself, Kat?
Absolutely. I am an inclusion and belonging expert in the realm of engineering. So I am a professional engineer, and I went through a unique pathway as an engineering undergraduate, worked in aerospace for a while. I've got my MBA, then my Doctor of Social Science, and now I'm an expert in culture and cultural management and so forth.
So how did you get into that? Like, you started from an engineer and went into inclusion. How did that happen?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really great question. I started out as a young engineering student thinking that not even knowing that there were any questions about the balance of gender in engineering. I just thought that engineering was an opportunity for me, and I went into it. And I started working in the aircraft industry in Toronto and had no problems. I felt welcome, I felt included, and I felt that my skills and expertise were desired and needed and wanted. So I really felt fine. However, as I grew in expertise and as my ambitions grew, and I was looking more and more at how can I make a better difference in this department, I started to notice some changes in the behaviors of some of the managers, and it was very subtle, very subtle. I noticed that when I moved back out west. So I'm in Victoria, British Columbia now, and again, the majority of engineers and the majority of people that I was working with in the realm of engineering were very welcoming and supportive and excited to have me there. However, a few were not. And then I started to pay attention. I started to wonder if it was because of me, is it my personality, or is it because of my gender, which was a very weird thought for me. So I started, like I said, paying more attention, looking around at different organizations, looking at the profession of engineering in general in our province. And I noticed that we had a very small number of women in the profession, about 10, 11% at the time. Even now, women really only represent around 15% of the engineering population, with new engineering graduates represented about 20% by women. So it's still a bit of an issue. I thought that it was the way that we manage. So I did my MBA to explore that more, and I learned all about change management and organizational health. But that I couldn't seem to make a difference. So then I started looking more at, all right, what does make cultural change? How can I investigate what's happening in engineering? And how can I make the changes necessary so that other women who do come into the stream towards engineering, that they feel like they belong? So that was in a nutshell.
Man-agers. So man-agers is the keyword here. So yeah, you said a few, right? So is it really a problem? Because there will always be like idiots in groups of 100, you know? So is it, but I mean, these two can possibly ruin the whole ecosystem. So I guess we need to be careful in hiring these folks with biases that will cost money to your business, literally, you know? So I think it's just bad apples. But just like, for example, if they're sexists, they might have a bunch of other false beliefs. For example, think that young people cannot add value to the table. So, and isn't that like costing a business is my question? Like, And actually my first question is, isn't it like part of this equation? Like, what can we do to not hire these folks with biases that might cause the business?
That's another really tricky question. The challenge that most businesses face is that those individuals are often already in places of influence within the organization. So in an academic organization, they may be a dean, they may be a vice president, they may be a department chair who is very charismatic, has great appeal. One of the challenges that I have noticed and experienced is that because the predominance of individuals in engineering are male, if there is an individual coming forward who is what I would call a man's man, someone who really appeals to men because they form a connection, whatever it is, a man's man often will not be able to communicate with women, often will not be able to create an environment that's welcoming to women because their focus is on men. And so that kind of perpetuates a cycle of hiring people that look like themselves. They look and they recognize that, oh, this person sounds like me, they talk like me, and it's almost a fear of the unknown, really.
Yeah, they're comfortable, they don't want to get outside that zone.
Yeah, and they don't understand that there are different ways of creating knowledge. That is the key. It's the key to inclusion too, is being open to other ways of creating knowledge, and that requires a lot of patience, and a lot of willingness to listen before we speak.
Right. I know these kinds, I've dealt with them. I've even hired them myself. The thing is, like testosterone, if you leave it as is without estrogen in the mix, or, other brain chemicals, it leads you in a direction you don't really want. Testosterone can be good because it's like it's power, it's energy, it's quick. But you need to balance it out with various other chemicals, which can be done by thinking in some different ways and educating yourself in others. Because it doesn't scale. It might the testosterone one might be quite impressive on the short term, but will very much stagnate over the long term. What do you think about that?
I think it's almost. I think you're right. I love that idea. The idea that they're bringing up, the chemistry, the ability to create new knowledge. But if you always have the same chemical base, if you don't have other chemicals being added in and mixed in, you're only always going to end up with the same outcome. So by having that testosterone-based direction, and it's not even just men. There are a lot of women who very much suppress the feminine side and they activate their own masculine side. So the as you said, the competitive part, the go-to it, that strong, assertive, aggressive sometimes person, they bring out those attributes. Like that could be, those are women just as easily as they are men. And when we start to push aside the feminine, and I have to admit, I did a lot of that in my youth. As a young engineer, that's how I figured out I could fit in the most, was if I cut my hair really short and I wore a tie and I wore pants all the time, and people stopped noticing that I'm female, which was a bit of a strain on my psyche and did end up with some mental health issues that arose. So it's yeah, I agree. I think if we only have that one way of thinking, no matter what those people look like, if we only invite that one way of thought, we restrict the kinds of outcomes that we can create. And that's not going to be able to solve the really crazy problems that we're facing today in the world.
Because when you just follow your testosterone as a man, I think it's easy to make a lot of money. It's like being very Wall Street bro-y type of, just that it doesn't scale, period. We've seen what happened with folks like, what's his name? The Wolf of Wall Street. Forgot his name. It's just better for my own psyche to do so. But is like constantly following these testo-driven serotonin loop. And yeah, if you surround yourself with, because I told you last meeting that we had that, I think the diversity word has been perverted by many. Then I somewhat shifted in that opinion, because I understand why a lot of folks piggyback on that word for money. That's somewhat okay. I've piggybacked on stuff for money too. I just believe that having strong values is what scales, So if you constantly piggyback on I'm black or whatever, so like give me rights, and so no, like go do some work, go put in some action. Yes, you might have to work twice as hard, but that's not really the point, there's folks that crunch 160K ultra marathons on a daily basis. They work very hard. They don't get rewarded that much, Anyway, so I had mixed feelings about it. And on my side, it's like I've been diverse, quote unquote, from day one. So it's not something that I want to talk about, but obviously I need to think larger than myself and kind of think of the world out there. I do have a thesis though, which is that I do think the issue is kind of self-fixing itself. And I want your opinion on that, because yours is way more than an opinion. Mine is opinion from some points of data that I have. But my thesis is that, yeah, it's old folks that have this mentality, that solidified that mentality, that like, haha, I'm a man's man. And I think it's mostly men, right? It's a man-dominated world. We can include women in there, but like it's like 95% are men. And I think these will just go extinct, because that mentality is not the highest IQ driven one. And I think IQ is equal to the most amount of money and power. I don't think that, men stay for long in power. A man, for example, would be Donald Trump, right? And Donald is not at the top. He's been prime minister. That could be like a counter argument here. But I'm referring to, let's say, Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos. These guys are pretty much driven by IQ, and I think that is the future. And both of these guys, they include everyone. They just understand that diversity is equal to data and knowledge is equal to money and power. So do you think it will disappear by itself, or do you think it's also important to talk about it and have it disappear the quickest, I guess?
I think it's important to talk about it, because if we talk about it and if we are deliberate in the way that we address inclusion, that we address culture, then we can minimize the impact. Otherwise, what I would anticipate is a crash, is a global crash where we're suddenly now going to have to pull society back together again. And I think that's part of the plan, right? If you look at the anarchists, that's really what they're working towards, is let's break down the governments so that we can rebuild it in a different way. And yet, I think that would set us back into a dark ages of sorts.
Yeah, we certainly. The philosophy of like don't fix what's not broken sometimes is taken the wrong direction. I still think we need to constantly work on stuff, even if it's not broken, right? But yeah, definitely breaking society up would not help folks in any ways. I think sometimes we forget how fortunate we are to live in a world in which I can talk to you right now. I have water, I have food, I have my needs taken care of. That was not the case like 80 years ago. It was a total different world. And what you're referring to, these society shattering events, I guess, the George Floyd event, or Floyd, I forgot his name is spelled, but yeah, that was mayhem. People revolted, people were breaking shit and starting fires. So I guess people were quite unhappy with that. And yeah, when you see someone being choked to death, that's what happens, right? You're like, man, I'm so surprised that this guy has his life, this police officer, I think he's in jail right now, but yeah, like that creates rage in people, to suffocate another human is just not it's not a nice thing to watch. It's pretty cruel. So like, yeah, we need to talk about these things. Do you feel we're making progress though? is everything improving right now?
I do think everything is improving. I think what's happening is more and more individuals are moving forward in their understanding of others. And I think a lot of that comes because of these major incidents. And by the way, the major incidents that we're having, I think, are very normal. They're normal adjusting points. What I'm concerned about is that if we don't continue to work on our culture and our society, that will be a larger event that would happen. And I've thought a little bit about that, and I don't want to go there right now. To answer your question, though, yes, I do think that things are getting better. I think that our culture is moving towards a more inclusive one. I think it happens more in pockets than it does globally, but in pockets around the world. You know, it's not a whole systemic change, but it's little local. Also, what I wanted to say, I had another great idea.
And I want to pick up the pockets
Go
thing,
ahead.
because it's also like my theory of everything, like AI, for example, it will be in pockets in the world. But I think what you're mentioning here, and yeah, it's quite important to mention that the most racist and sexist countries in the world are not Canada or US. They're like countries in development, you know. Why? Because of the lack of education. You know, people still think that women are like servants, and Chinese folks thinks that, you know, black people are like aliens, sort of. So yeah, if you ever step foot in China or in Asia and they see a black man, it's just listen to what they're gonna say, and also like watch their faces and their expressions, you know. It's like, and there it's like open, you know, it's not like taboo to be racist. It's like, yeah, that's what we do. And I'm not just talking in China, I'm talking vice versa. Me in Mexico, I get called the gringo or güero all the time. I don't mind, by the way. I mean, I've always been an outfit, you know, like if I'd have a skin color, it would be blue, you know. Yeah, literally, I'd be like some kind of avatar or something. Yeah, and it's, I mean, in Africa, if you go in Africa and you're white man, people call you white man, you know. Folks do not, well, they have a word for it. It's not white man, but people don't often realize it, you know. But it doesn't stop the fact that, you know, we need to progress, right? So there's probably a name for that wrong philosophy of mine of like, yeah, let's compare stuff. In my essence, I'm a progressist, you know, like I want to see progress. I want to see 1% improvement daily in humanity. And I think we need to be at the forefront. We need to lead the movement, you know, and just have more rights and just improve the lives of everyone. In the case of women, and I'm pretty sure in the case of people of color, we've seen an improvement through entrepreneurship, which is my other theory of everything. I do think that entrepreneurship is pretty much saving everyone, because it's entrepreneurship is education, right? So you just get smarter. Entrepreneurship is capitalism. It forces you to deal with people of all sexes and color. What do you feel the role of entrepreneurship will play into diversifying the world and making it a better place?
Wow, you said a lot there. And before I talk about entrepreneurship, I'd like to touch on a couple of things that you said. One of them was about how these different cultures can look like aliens in the world. You being a gringo in Mexico, or a black man or a colored person being a god in China, you know, someone so different, or a white man being really noticeable in Africa. And I would say that that's true, and that there is an implicit hierarchy of power. So as a white man in Africa, that white man is very well revered, even though there's so much colonialism that happened and so much aggression against whites from those populations. There still is this hierarchy, and that is a big challenge. So the entrepreneurship part will continue to be, I think, biased until we are able to recognize that implicit hierarchy is a fallacy. It's not true. It's not legitimate. It's just one that we've constructed in our society. We have a patriarchal society, right? And so we, even as children, we grow up thinking that, oh, the men are going to be these professions. They're going to be CEOs of companies. They're going to be doctors. They're going to be surgeons. They're going to be accounting partners, right? That's what's going to happen. So until we can start to break those stereotypes right from childhood, and that means breaking those stereotypes in our young families, which means breaking those stereotypes throughout society. So I'm a little, in my opinion, about social order and inclusion. I believe that it's easier for a white male to become a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah, definitely. Fully agree with that. But is the hard, because the equation is work long, hard, and smart. Okay, yeah, the hard one, sure. The long one, you have the same hours in a day as anyone, and the smart one, your brain is capable of developing pathways as much as a white man, if not more, easily, if you connect yourself to the internet, if you surround yourself with people like me. Like, I mean, if you're a young black dude and you want to be mentored by me, I'm there, like I'll help you. I'm 100% on team entrepreneur.
Let me interject something here. What is an indicator of success in your world?
Happiness, freedom, money, power, because I want to use it to impact the world and to make people happier and freer.
Yeah, and it's the money power part that is a masculine trait.
And but it's also, you cannot impact the world without money and power, or as much, in a capitalist system, as long as we live in a capitalist system.
I think that is true. If we buy into that, that's the only way to succeed. However, there are individuals like Mother Teresa who had a huge impact on the world with nothing.
I agree with that.
Now, granted,
Mother Teresa was very testosterone-y, by the way. Yeah, no, she was, like, that's a fact, like, and she wasn't necessarily nice to be around. Just like, I think she was treating her customer really right, but I don't think she was treating her team that well. And but I mean, that's just like a blimp in everything that she did. She was a saint, literally. Yeah, she helped a bunch of people. Gandhi didn't had money. He had power though. Like, and Mother Teresa had crap tons of power too. She was very influential. So it's like, yeah, power is like the ability to have others come behind your cause, connections, sort of.
Yeah, okay.
But I think
I'll concede that point. You're right. I agree.
Yeah, money is a leverage, I think. So if you combine it with power, and I think in my case, I'd combine it with AI and automation, to do stuff at scale. Just that, I am obviously biased, right? And if I'm a white guy and I'm like, oh, this is good for you, even like the white stuff apart, if I'm like, this is good for you, but it's in reality, I don't fully understand you. That is where like stuff can go wrong. So ideally, to do good, it would be kind of my AI, if you want, and your AI, and there would be like a middle between each, so that if I want to give out money or knowledge to you or pieces of data, well, at least it fits your whole circle, whatever that is. And your circle would be, how can Charles Energy maximize my freedom and happiness? That's what this algorithm would be about. And yeah, I'm going like far in the future, but that's my vision, at least.
Oh, I like it because that's exactly what we need. Is we need to be able to listen to each other, recognize our differences, and work together to elevate our common purpose of making this world better.
Yeah, because the golden rule, I mean, it's basic. It's like law. We wouldn't need law if we would be smart and aligned individuals, if we had these algorithms, right? Managing our decisions. But golden rule, like for me, going out on an 80-kilometer run is normal. Should I impose that on you? You know?
I hope not.
Yeah, there you go. And then law, for example, I think law protects us from the idiots in the room, people that will kill, steal, rape, you know, like that don't understand really like what it means to respect another's space. So yeah, I just think that a lot of people, they think that way. It's like, oh, what's good for me is also good for them.
Yeah.
And that's not the reality. And I mean, I'm trying to build a community of, let's say, COs. I know that we shared like a common DNA, let's call it like 70% common DNA, whatever DNA means in that case. Certainly not the real DNA, but just their values, how they think, and so forth. And from there, yeah, like maybe customize my advice to them, you know. But I need to make sure that at least they have that desire of doing something more. Founders and CEOs, quite bullish again on entrepreneurship, quite bullish. I think the internet is just changing how people think and educate themselves. I think they can have access to data. You can probably ask GPT, you know, is the white man more powerful if they're in Africa? But I mean, to ask a question, to ask a good question, you need to have the data. So it's kind of chicken and egg problem. And I think the other day I solved the chicken and egg equation, but not in that context though. Anyway, so I think that tools like that are accessible to all can educate, and fortunately plant a seed in them that's like, okay, I want freedom. What can bring me to freedom the quickest? Oh, maybe this, maybe that, maybe that. But it becomes very tricky, right? Because they have parents, their parents have beliefs, they impose their beliefs. Most of the time they are outdated beliefs. They put their traumas in them. What do you do with that?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And that's not one that I can answer for others either. But I encourage those in my sphere of influence to be as open and understanding, and to be, you know, fair, to be equitable, to be the way that we want the future to be, and just to think about it. That's what's missing in a lot of the challenges I think today, is that we're not growing critical thinkers. Our schools are not teaching kids to create knowledge. We're just giving them knowledge and sticking it on their heads and saying, and now learn this. That was part of my research with my doctorate, was to look at ways that kids create knowledge. And if they can create knowledge through exploration and by connecting the topics, and my main topic was physics, connecting those topics to their world and creating for themselves projects that improve their lives in those areas. So whether it's English or mathematics or physics or chemistry or whatever topic, to relate them, to connect them to their lives and allow the kids to explore and to divinate solutions, then they will begin to create knowledge that is for betterment, for improvement, and they'll feel more powerful. They'll feel like they have that they have the ability within themselves to make a difference. They'll know that because they'll have demonstrated it in school.
Empowered,
yeah, empowered. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a word. I feel I need to get my Facebook ads account back, you know, because they restricted my access some time ago. My plan for like short-term impact is still the same, is because we've talked about, like, I think ChatGPT is like the second phase of learning. You need to have data in your brain first before you can get to ask great questions and receive great answers. By the way, ChatGPT don't even need to ask you great questions, but if I sponsor my content, you know, like let's say I film a 30 minutes video of how to start in entrepreneurship. There would be motivation in there. There would be probably some homework, some education. If I sponsor it in Africa, I think I'm gonna pay 0.001 cent per view, you know. That could potentially be a good impact. Whatever people tell me, like, oh, why is this white man popping my feed? I think you need to go where people are. So, and in that day and age, it's certainly not a billboard. And yeah, I don't want to set up a billboard in Nigeria, you know, like it will cost me, it's complicated. So I still think that sponsoring content and giving out education for free, making people somewhat accountable, have them subscribe to your page and constantly provide them motivation. I think that can be a good solution. What, before we leave, what do you think about that one?
I think that's a lovely idea. I think that gifting education is very important in Canada, and I think in the United States, and I don't know about Mexico, but in Canada for sure, education is a right, and every child has an opportunity and is required to receive.
Right.
And so in those nations where education is not a right, then absolutely giving it away for free, making it easily accessible, helping our youth, the children of the world, to create knowledge in a way that makes sense to them so that they can help make a difference, a positive difference in their own lives and in the lives of their families and communities. I think that's a great idea. I like it.
Yeah, I'll pull the trigger on that one. I really want to make it happen. In Mexico, by the way, I started a pod in Spanish, so hopefully that will naturally reach out people. That'll be slower, but yeah, I think that's pretty cool. In Latam, there's a lot of talent here. Not the same situation as Africa, but still, yeah, lots of people in poverty and lack of education is pretty flagrant. It generally speaking, right? Like you said, there's pockets of very smart folks, very successful folks, even here in Mexico. Where can people find out more about you, Kat?
Mostly online. I do have a website. It's at lockhorsegroup.ca. So that's no C's and no U's. LOKHORSTGROUP.com. And I have a channel and I'm on LinkedIn. So look for me and I'll try and make myself more accessible.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm Charles Cormier, CEO of Podbuyer. If you want to start or scale your podcast, podbuyer.com. Thank you so much, Kat. It's a wrap.